Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we're going to call a talk about how to revamp your consulting panel, and we'll show a case study. We're thrilled to have you there, and in this session we'll be exploring a structural methodology to transform how you manage your consulting procurement, and in particular building new panels and making sure that you balance cost efficiency with strategic value. And of course, it's based on a real world application. So we'll walk you through that. So first of all, if you can move to the second slide, please. Yeah. So I'd like to start with a quote that I like because it's first it's fashion, which is rather cool. We don't have often fashion quotes in procurement. But it really resonates with what we're trying to talk about today, which is that quality is what really matters, and price in that sense is just something that comes with it. And it's so easy to focus only on price. And we had a conversation just a few days ago about someone who said, oh, we always take the lowest bidder. Okay, right. Consulting might not always be the best answer, but this is something that is important in consulting in particular, is to work on both value and quality and price, and that's where you really have the best the best impact for your internal stakeholders. So today the objective is to explore this methodology for revamping your consulting panel, and that methodology balances cost efficiency and strategic value. So if we were going to kind of give you what are the key takeaways that you'll have from this session, first is that understanding what are the common pitfalls in building panels for consulting and how to avoid them. Then we'll look at how to structure the approach, an approach that integrates cost reduction, of course, but also have a value-driven outcomes. See how we can take a balanced and collaborative approach to transform the stakeholder satisfaction, but also the ROI, because we know that one of the key difficulty with consulting is about the key stakeholders. And finally, show that these methodologies is practical and will bring minimal disruption because it really fits into your existing ways of working. So very briefly, before we dive into, here is what we're going to talk about. We'll talk about the challenges with traditional approaches. Then we'll talk about, the new approach to consulting panels. The how it works has been moved into the new approach. So this is one only topic. Then we'll talk about a real life application. And we'll finish with the takeaways and the Q&A. And today we are three speakers. I'll start. I'm Hélène Lafitte. I'm the CEO at Consulting Quest, and we are specialized in helping companies optimize their consulting procurement. And we have developed proprietary methodologies, including the one that we'll be preparing, and digital tools. Laurent?
So my name is Laurent Thomas. I work with, after a long career in consulting and then in the chemical industry, I joined Consulting Quest 2 years ago to work on our digital solutions.
Doug, your turn.
I'm Doug Watanabe. I'm the president of PSS Partners. We're a partner of Consulting Quest. Been doing this for about 25 years, have worked for various boutique firms in cost takeout. The last larger consulting firm I worked for was Alvarez & Marsal. So worked quite a bit in private equity, worked for a family office with a small portfolio of companies where I was vice president of operations as well. So pleasure to have everybody on the call. Thanks for including me.
Okay, and Doug is our all the other categories expert here. We're mostly specialized in consulting, Laurent and I. Cool. So let's get to it, right?
Sorry, uh, I was listening to you. I forgot I was the one in charge of
yeah, you were an
kind of
hour of me, I know, of course.
moving the slides.
So
Okay.
let's move to the challenges. So just to get the sense of what we're talking about. We're talking about consulting panels. And before we get into consulting panels, let's talk about supplier panels in general. There are benefits and limitations to building panels. The benefits are quite obvious and Laurent and Duke, please, you can jump into whatever I say. That's not me doing all the talking. So the whole point is when you build a consulting panel, what is interesting is that you can streamline procurement processes, meaning that after you have signed an MSA with your suppliers, you are able to get them to work faster because all the heavy work is already done. So it's going to be much faster to hire them on a given project, for instance. The second element, which is cost savings, you can pre-negotiate terms and conditions and prices, and that can be very interesting. And it's usually kind of a balance between giving some visibility or committing to volumes versus having more interesting, more competitive prices. So that's the second element. The third one is have improve your supplier relationship, because building a panel also implies building a long-term relationship with your suppliers. Risk management, of course, you know your suppliers and you can make sure that there's no issues with them. And in particular, if you look at direct procurement, that comes as a very important part of your work as procurement, compliance and governance. And the last part is quality assurance, is that the people that you build long-term relationship with, you want to make sure that they're delivering consistently quality to you. So these are the pros.
I'll add to that as well. I think there's an innovation aspect as well. So when you have multiple parties looking at your business, you likely have different perspectives and can gain from those perspectives a little bit of innovation and maybe a best approach to solving an issue that you may have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also and actually
the logic is
yes.
The logic is that they know you, and as a consequence, the ramp up is much faster when you involve them on a project.
Yeah, and if you look at the cons, I think that the two elements are linked: reduce competition and supplier dependency. Of course, if you reduce the list of suppliers that you work with, that can be that can lead to reduced competition, a rigidity, especially if you have you enforce rigid rules to work only with suppliers in the panel. Potential for higher cost. So that depends a little bit on how you've built your MSAs, but it can lead to higher cost because you force your internal stakeholders to work with a given number of suppliers that may not be the cheapest, or that you have locked in for several years, where prices can vary.
Maybe we can give an example on these kind of things, particularly for large groups. The situation could be that the group decides to sign MSAs with global suppliers. As a consequence, you end up with MSAs in place with only the big guys, which obviously might not be the most competitive ones. And at some point, the title that says cons could be cons if not done right. Because if you do it right, you don't carry all those cons all the time. But if you take another example, the reduced competition, if you have only as it was the case when I first joined Solvay, we had only, for most of the projects, McKinsey, BCG, and Hollenberger. And anytime we were buying something, we were going to those three, and they knew that we were going to those three. So there was absolutely no effort on competition because they knew that we would not award everything to one guy and that they would have their chance every three projects. And that's part of the reasons Hélène and I had discussed and Consulting Quest was launched because we were extremely bad at working on sourcing consulting firms.
I think the other aspect that you face is a con, especially internal, with stakeholders that get comfortable with what they have when you're rebuilding a panel is they know the business. This consulting firm knows the business, right? And
Mhm.
you have that pushback of, well, somebody else is going to have to get ramped up. I'm not sure that there's always a lot of truth to that, but because a lot of businesses, especially across industries where there's demonstrated expertise, you can transition a lot of that knowledge and ramp up pretty quickly. I think it could be more project dependent as well. If there's a longer project and more valuable, input from a supplier panel, you might want to take that. If it's short and it's easy and you could just get it done, maybe you go with somebody that knows the business really well.
No, that's a fair point, and we'll discuss that later because that's part of the difficulty to build a panel for consulting in general. But so it applies differently to our methodology, of course, and in a way. Maybe we can move to the next slide.
Here we are.
All right. So here, what we're trying to explain in this slide is why it's so difficult to build a panel for consulting. And the reason is that usually when you look at the building a panel, the idea is really that 80-20, I need to cover 80% of my needs with that panel. And of course it looks like it could apply the same way to consulting. But the problem is that the project that you have in consulting, and when you look at your profile, is that consulting is not a recurring business per se, which means that you may have recurring needs for consulting as a whole, but individually the project year to year will be totally different. And it means that the people that can deliver those projects might be different and should be different if the needs are really different. And it means that if you have a panel that is usually a small panel for consulting, you may lock yourself with companies that are either don't have the right skills or are too expensive for that type of project or don't have the right industry experience, etc. And so there's a risk that you won't get the value you deserve on this specific project. So the way you build a panel cannot be the same than what you would do for chemical product, for chemical or direct goods. You need to think in a different way. So if you look at your project in a given year, you will find three types of projects. The first type is those very big, recurring or long-term projects. Ones are the ones that will capture probably most of your spend and will probably be done by a limited number of suppliers. Those people, you need to have MSAs with them. They are your strategic suppliers. They probably have repeat business. They're not necessarily big firms. Firstly, that's a very important point. But you know that you need to develop quality relationship and have pre-negotiated terms because it's predictable that you are going to work with them this year and next year and the year after. So that's your first bucket. You have a second bucket, which is done of, strategic project, not necessarily not recurring, meaning that you may not have that project every year in the next 3 years, but you know that you will have the project. You can predict, you can anticipate, and then you need to have qualified suppliers that may answer those needs. Those two, those strategic suppliers and qualified suppliers, that's what makes your panel, right? And then you have a last bucket, which is one of those not strategic, not recurring, and unpredictable project. Those ones that in the middle of the year you have a stakeholder that raise their hand and say, "Hey, I need this," and those one you cannot predict. So, and you may have qualified suppliers in your panel, but that's absolutely not, mandatory or not always the case. The whole point is to make sure that that tail is as small and limited as possible, because you have anticipated what could be the needs by discussing with the internal stakeholders before you build that panel.
And at the end of the day, what really the key criteria is whether it's recurring or not. If it's suppliers that are on such a niche that there will never be a project like that, or at least there will not be a project like that for the next 4 or 5 years, there is no point in having an agreement with them. We will create false expectations, and then there will be frustration. It will take a lot of time. It's better to negotiate a one-off contract. But for the rest, I would say that one of the key particularities of consulting is that a small panel is not necessarily the best option, because there are so many capabilities, so many specialties, that what really matters is to be able to cover your bases and to align with your strategy and to identify what are the key areas where you will need some support, and then to have enough providers in each of those buckets to cover your needs, which means that indeed you have a panel that has many supplier providers, but it's as if you had several panels, several sub-panels clubbed together. If you see what I mean, Hélène.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And also another point is that for large companies, the panel is one thing, but at the end of the day, you might have multiple panels that are a global one that is used by everybody with global players, but then a multiplicity of small ones that correspond to the regional needs. And then you have a local panel, and it is fine. There is no need to have only a global panel when you have a global company. And that's a mistake that a lot of companies are making, because they kind of trap themselves in trying to work only with global suppliers.
And that are usually more expensive.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, I was waiting for you to turn the page again. Just raise your hand.
I can always,
Give me a sign. Okay.
Just one thing also that is important, and it links to all of this, is that when you build a panel for consulting, you cannot only look at rate cards, because rate cards, it's just one point in the equation. And the problem is that consulting is not a commodity. It means that if you have 3 different consulting firms, they will have a different approach, they will have different staffing, etc. Price is just like one part of the problem. And indeed, pricing in consulting is based on multiple factors. So when you look at a consulting firm, you should look at of course, the price, but also how they staff, who they are, how they approach problems, what are their skills, and what is their industry experience. And so when you decide to build a panel, and you of course organize that probably by subcategories of consulting, in each subcategory you need to ask yourself, what type of consultants do I want to work with? What needs will I have in the future? We could give an example with strategy, because it's a very easy category in that sense. Strategy is like, it's a little bit of a big bag where you will have, high-level strategy where you can find all the, the McKinsey and BCG and Bain and consort. That's the type of strategy work that they'll do. They'll define the strategy for the next 3 years. They'll have, strategy roadmap and all of this. That's kind of work. That's in that bag. But you have also in the same bag everything that's around strategy execution. And here, usually you find smaller firms that do that work. They all belong to that same strategy category, but they don't do exactly the same type of work. They won't approach the problem the same way. They won't put the same people on the projects, and the duration of the project will be different. So if you just look at rate cards, then you will eliminate the big firms immediately because they're more expensive and say, oh, we don't need them. But do you not need them really? They have something. They're not there just because, they're there. They bring value to the table as well. And you might need that value too. So the whole point is to think about which part of do I need? And then you could decide to look at this with the lens on, okay, I'm cutting strategy to other subcategories and subcategories, and you have a never-ending list of providers. Or you could look at that with a different angle with case studies and looking at technical value and commercial value. And that's where you need more information than just rate cards when you doing an RFI for a PAM, right? And so your panel should reflect the needs that you have in the future, and it should give you more information than just the rate cards.
Doug, you wanted to say something?
No, you're good. It's you, Laurent, still you. I can't move the slide.
Sure.
I gotta get there. Maybe you could take that one.
Yeah, sure. So indeed, this entire page is about the fact that the one of the key success factors is to make sure that you will create something that will be a good fit with the rest of the organization. So obviously, the objective is to find ways to optimize the value for money. But the primary thing is to make sure that you have something that will support the transformation and all the activities that require consulting in your company. So it's not only about cost, it's really about preparing something that will enable the strategy to make sure that engagements will be starting fast, that the consulting engagements will be aligned with the organizational goals, that the consultants are consultants that will both meet the technical needs and the cultural fit. Also, that we'll use the right consultants for the right projects, because if we have a panel that's too small, we might end up using guys that are okay at doing change management on change management, but maybe we should have professionals to do that. And conversely, maybe the guy that did well on pricing is not the right guy to do procurement, and so on and so on. So the whole purpose of the exercise is to have something that will be plug and play for when you roll out the various initiatives that you have in the pipe. One thing I should have precise is that we have a chat. If you have questions or remarks, do not hesitate to type something in the chat. We'll take questions at the end, but if we have a lively conversation, it's even better for everybody. So feel free. Okay, so speaking about change management, one of the key challenges
about the right firms, Doug.
Yeah, maybe Doug will jump in on that one. The key challenge when you try to diversify the provider base in consulting is that a lot of the decisions in sourcing consultants are based on risk and on trust and on relationships. So if you discuss with a business leader that is used to working with company A for years and has always had okay results with that company, and they might be quite concerned about having to work with firms that they don't know, that they will discover, that will have to train, and all these kind of things. So getting the buy-in of the stakeholders takes time, and will require some change management and some messaging, I would say, because there is a fear that you will disrupt the relationships. There is a fear that they might end up working with consultants that are not as good as you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah, I think you may end up with some folks that are out to dinner with the consultants, out at the bar, at the football match, whatever, right? On their boat, over the weekends, going golfing with them. And, there's a close friendship there versus just a professional relationship as well. And so building a cross-functional consensus is super helpful, and using a lot of facts to build the narrative, and also defining what's important for that particular stakeholder ahead of time to make sure that their needs are addressed, and that the messaging to the incumbent goes out the right way is pretty important, because it's always easier to stick with an incumbent, especially in a relationship like that. It's just better to do it at a lower cost, by applying some pressure. So I think that's true of every category of spend, not just consulting spend, but these relationships tend to be a little bit more, they act like they're some special strategic thing. But the reality is there's a number of suppliers that can actually shut down your business that may be more critical to it. And this consulting relationship is more of just a friendship that's been built up in somebody's head. So, use those tools to make sure that you build consensus around the organization prior to, making a change to a relationship like that.
Absolutely. And I think that, to your point, indeed, consulting is built on trust, and that relationships between internal stakeholders and the clients exist. But the problem that we see here is often that relationship with consultants is left to your internal stakeholders and only them, which is a problem because it's intrapersonal relationship. That's not necessarily supporting your company's interests. So that relationship need to continue. They need to have that relationship. They need to have that trust. But you still need to open a dialogue as procurement, as the institutional, relationship between company A and company B, instead of consultant A and client B. I think that's also very important.
Okay.
And we have Shabnam. I hope I said that right. He was saying that he or she, I don't know, find that panels need buy-in from senior leader and position of authority to initiate a panel and gain buy-in from stakeholders. And yes, absolutely. And that's what Doug was mentioning, and saying that you need to have facts to really explain how the approach works and convince people that are in position of authority and are decision makers. And that's where you need to start in order to move forward. That's
in the last
necessity.
In the last 12 months, we had two totally different situations with Hélène doing this type of exercise. One mandated by I would say the COO of the company, that was a bit tired of only using, I would say, the most famous consultants of them all, and wanted to diversify. Of course, when this kind of initiative is pushed by the COO, it's easier to get acceptance. And another one where it was the procurement team that had the feeling that indeed they were getting hosed by their incumbent, and wanted to convince the others to change. And this took a little bit more of time to be able to gather the data and convince before moving on. We succeeded at the end, but it was a totally different, I would say, pathway.
Absolutely. So the what is important is that what we're presenting here is not something absolutely new or a complete different process. The process is the same. It's very similar to the ones that you may have used in the past. What really makes the difference is how you collaborate with your stakeholders, because this approach cannot work without them. You need to work hand in hand with them, and so not necessarily in a way where they're fully convinced at first, but you need to take their advice and their insight into account to do it right. That's a very important part. And the second thing that is important is that because it's working on, standard renewal processes, then it's minimal disruption for them and for your teams. And that's also something important, because you're not creating something completely new that they need to learn and so on. That's also something important. So the whole I wouldn't say not the whole innovation, because how to build a panel is something rather complicated, and but what is really new is to use mock projects in your negotiations to really evaluate the fit and the value they can bring. So, and it's not just mock projects. It's a work to be done with them on what has happened in the previous year, what type of project they've done, and what they intend to do in the future, in order to add some scenarios to your RFP, RFI, and ask the consultant to position themselves on those projects. And I say on purpose position themselves instead of building a proposal, because you don't want them to spend hours and hours to answer on project that may not be done really. You just want them to give you some sense of what would be their approach, how would they staff that project, and how much they would price that project. And what is important is that you don't want only past projects. You also want to put a little of project that might happen in the future, because you don't want them to give you some very, very fancy competitive pricing on past project that they know they'll not be doing. And then when a real project comes, then it's a completely different ball game, and you have completely different prices, because the whole point is to see how their daily rates are really applied in a real project, right? That's the whole goal of that. And also looking at how they approach a given problem, how they would solve it, what they would bring to the table. That's an excellent way to do that, because presentations of companies where they explain this is our approach, of 5-step approach, blah blah blah. This is one thing, but when you see that in a real situation and potentially in a project that you have done with another consultants in the past, that's very enlightening. Do I like the way they do things? Do I see myself working with them? Do I think that they can tackle my problem? Which are the questions you should ask yourself when you look at consultants in a proposal.
And this is leading to a lot of, I would say, questions, because if you are rather vague in your specification and you give a lot of room to the consultants to answer, you might realize that some project that you have done in the past, that for whatever reason you have done in 12 months, they can do in 9 or they can do in 6. And it impacts tremendously the cost, and as a consequence, the ROI of the project. And sometimes they will approach it in a if it's linked to an IT project, for instance, they will approach it with a waterfall approach. Sometimes they will approach it with an agile way of working. Sometimes you will see the staffing of the resources being flat all the time. Sometimes they will have ramp up, ramp downs. It gives you a lot of insights onto how they are using their rate cards. And if you just have the rate cards, you have something that is very, very static, and that can be used in multiple ways by smart consultants. You can easily add a couple of resources, add a couple of weeks, and do whatever you want with the pricing if you just look at the rate cards. And move on.
Yeah.
So
you don't have the last version.
I don't have
So
the last version.
no, you don't. But that's not the last version. That's
sorry.
bad. But it's okay. No worries. That's
That's
not a
okay.
problem.
I will stop sharing. How do I do that? Stop sharing. I click on stop sharing.
Yes.
So you can explain the concept, and then I find meanwhile the right version, and I
Yeah.
will
So I can. Yeah. So the idea here is to when you evaluate the consultants, you want to evaluate on both the technical side and the commercial side. So that's the whole point. And the way you do that is that you need to look at the elements that were given in their presentation. So remember that we asked for scenarios, and we asked them to position themselves on past project and future project, and give some position themselves both on the approach and so the price on those. So what you have at your disposal is their presentation. You have access to their approach and their experience and all their presentation of how this is how we do things. And then you have access to their daily rates, and you have access to their case studies, how their prices on the case studies. So you need to divide those two into two different dimensions. One is purely technical, which is their capabilities, the quality of what they've shown in the case studies, their level of skill, their level of experience, all of this. That's one dimension. The other dimension, you need to look at two elements. One is the prices on the case studies, and actually you can see, because this is the same project, you can compare the different, just like you would do in a real project. And the other one is to look at the daily rate instead of doing something that is really simple. You need to look at a blended weekly rate. So you build you build a team that you think is relevant, which could be, for instance, a partner, and then an engagement manager, and two consultants or three consultants, and you build that, and you compare those rates, which means that you're comparing again apple to apples, instead of doing they do rates, it's 2,000 for partners that you got all the rates and you cannot compare them. So you need to really understand what that would mean in reality on a project with them, and then you can build a commercial score. And then when you've done that, then you can kind of have that famous matrix. We love our matrix when one dimension is technical and one dimension is commercial, and you want everybody to be in the upper right quadrant, because that's where people do everything right. Exactly.
Okay.
And so that was the first element, which is the variance of the case studies versus the incumbent, because ultimately that's what you're looking at, and then the variance on the blended weekly rate. And that's
so
how
you can see that the incumbent is at 100% of itself. And then you see the others as compared to the incumbent, instead of showing actual values or just showing percentages. That gives a better sense of what we are talking about. And obviously on that chart, where you need to be is the bottom left.
Absolutely.
And then when you combine the blended weekly rates, the case studies, the payment terms, the rebates, all the commercial conditions, you can create a composite commercial score.
Yes. And then you have the technical score that is linked to all the different dimensions. And that's how you can identify your top candidates. And here, because you're building a panel, you may end up with maybe the 5 in your panel potentially. So
one very important point is that you have one chart like this per segment. So if you're in your panel, you have said, I have, for instance, strategy, operations, and marketing, for instance. I'm just kind of making this up. You will have 3 charts. You will not have one chart that has them all because it doesn't make sense at all to compare the strategy guys with project management guys, for instance. And that's very important to segment indeed your panel and to be able to have those sub-segments, and for each of those sub-segments, a mini panel.
So now let's just take a moment and understand why that works. The way we know procurement teams, and we've been working with procurement. I'm sure Doug will agree on that point. Is that we know that they often have constraints in terms of budget and of staffing, and so it's difficult sometimes to do something that is that different from what they know, and that difficult to do because you need some expertise. And the way we build that is in a way where, because you collaborate with external resources, then you have your team that have that time constraints, and they can do the minimum part of the work, and then everything else is done by an external team that has the time and the experience to do that. And that's also, you're not sacrificing either the quality or the relationship with the retainer stakeholders. You really have the best of both worlds. The second element is, we know about budget, right? That they are tight. That's not new. But because we deliver results, and that the saving that we get through such methodology is usually around 20 to 30%, or should I say it's never less than that, then it's kind of a no-brainer, because it's more or less self-sustaining. So if you launch the methodology, you'll get results, and then the project is paid by itself, right?
Yep. Okay. Yep, please go ahead.
No, that's it. And then the whole point also is that, as Doug mentioned at the beginning, we know how it works, and it means that you need to embed change management since the very beginning in the way you work with your clients. So you're not facing those obstacles of reluctance from stakeholders.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now let's speak about a case study that has been using a lot of Doug's time and of my time as well.
Yeah, indeed. So Doug, if you give a bit of context about your clients.
Yeah. Doug, you want to give a little bit of color on this?
Sure. It's actually a global company with operations in Asia Pac, mostly in the US, though probably 80% of their revenues come from the US, and about a $5 billion construction material manufacturing company. Working with one of the larger consulting firms on every scope of work that they had. They engaged them during COVID when resources were a little bit scarce, but they were under a lot of pressure to upgrade their systems and their processes and the way that they worked. And so that particular supplier ended up getting very embedded and being paid extremely exorbitant rates. And we found that they were taking advantage of them from not just a rate perspective, but also a scope perspective, expenses, anything and everything that you can think of. They were being worked over, and extremely close relationship with a handful of the executives who, they had a direct impact on what they did on a day-to-day basis, contributing to even driving some of the strategy, picking and choosing the projects that they wanted to pick and choose for themselves. And so, kind of created a bad situation. It was a little bit of a vendor monster situation. So, um, you know, we had the support of the CEO and support of some other executives in the business to go and look at this particular relationship, but tread lightly. And so we did just that, but spent a couple months, more than a couple months, actually building consensus around just being able to build a panel and to see, what we could find externally. And what we found was 40, sometimes 60% savings against their rates. And when you included the scope, it pushed it up another 20 percentage points. So, quite an interesting project. We awarded, a few months ago, the first scope of work to another very large consulting firm that was just significantly less expensive. You could replace one name with the other, and it's the exact same thing. So, uh, I think it was pretty telling to show that one consulting firm got very, very comfortable. Their executives thought that they had, a pretty steady foothold. They were not cooperative throughout the process, and in fact raised rates through the process. And they got pushed out as a result. So it took a lot of consensus building at the beginning, and then we presented all of the facts in a solid process to create some really great results.
Mhm.
Yeah, so you anticipated on the next slide, but to your point, I think that what we were able to do is to have improvement both on the rate cards but also on the case studies. And again, I cannot stress enough how much it's important to look at both, because rate cards can be deceptive. They can give you the impression that you have good rates. But when you look at the fine lines, and I'm sure that Doug and Laurent know exactly what I'm talking about. When you look at the fine lines and the MSA, and how many hours a day or a week we're talking about, and how many weeks in a year that you are charged, and how many months are on a given project, that's where even a great rate on paper will become too much for what it's worth. And so this is very important to look at that.
And then another very important point was the rebates, because everyone, I mean, a lot of people, sometimes it's the only thing that is recognized as performance. So end-year rebates matter.
Yes.
And when we looked at the end-year rebates, the end-year rebates were based, and they were very small. It was like 1 or 2%. And on an industry like consulting that has margins in the 50% range, 1% is really, really small. And also, when we are looking at the details and the fine prints and the formulas, as Hélène is mentioning, those 1% were starting above $10 million of spend, meaning that you got zero on the first 10 million, then you got 1% above those 10 million, which meant that you had to spend 20 to reach 0.5 on average. So that was really not aligned with what we knew of the market. And working on this panel reshuffling, we ended up with a lot of candidates that were proposing between 5 and 10% from the first dollar, which was a pretty significant improvement. This was done on 7 different categories. So we had strategy, program management, finance, HR, supply chain, and I'm missing one. But this was definitely not done clubbing everything into one, as I was mentioning earlier.
We have another question, and that's to Doug. When conditioning a panel, I found that they can be very political. Were there any particular issues you came across on that side?
Not in building the new panel, but in unseating the incumbent, right? So it is, hey, they know our business. It was that issue that I talked about. They know our business, they know it better than anybody. And then you find out that they're actually putting the strategic plans and the investments together for the company as well, which didn't make any sense. It's like putting the fox in the hen house. So I think undoing all of that and them bringing the executives who were very close with the incumbent around to the point of realizing that that wasn't a good idea, that there was a lot of opportunity here, that they do need to have some competition, that the competition even is healthy from a innovation perspective, is an approach perspective, is really was a tall task to get to, but I think we did that. And there's a little bit of a new approach internally around the process of engaging some of these consultants. So,
And then creating the panel is one thing, but once you have a panel, you just have the theory, you have, in theory, we're able to save money. Where it really hit the mark, where the rubber hit the road, that's the way we should say it, that is when we applied the panel on the first project. When they saw that on the first few projects, it was actually delivering 30 to 40% savings and much better conditions and faster projects and those kind of things. And even the fact, the pushback we had at some point was, yeah, but it's so fast. If we work with them, we tell them what we want in a meeting, then they come back with a proposal. There is not even an RFP. There is no competition. We save time. Yeah, but you save time, but then they end up with a proposal that is 1 year long. Whereas when we had this project and we did the competition, yes, organizing the competition and so on took 2 to 3 weeks from the inception to the selection and the start of the project, which is rather fast. But then the project was 6 months long. So the net is -2.
Mhm.
And this took some education, but at the end of the day, they recognized that this was the right approach. And of course, next time they will be keener in taking this approach. This was with one function. Then we worked with another function, and we have progressively, I would say, one by one, to convert everybody to this new approach. It doesn't. I mean, you don't have everyone convinced overnight.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on.
Yes. So I think
I think we
that,
pretty much went. Yeah,
yeah, I think we went over everything. The last spot I think that also very important is that we covered a lot the first two parts, right? The first two bullets. I think that the other two that are quite common is that the SOW was prepared by consultants, and then there was minimal contract negotiations. I think this is very typical issues that you face when your internal stakeholders are taking care of the whole buying process for consulting. And you need to move to something that is more controlled by consultant or by procurement. And that means having the SOW that is prepared by procurement with stakeholders. And then that you're negotiating. And I wrote on purpose strategic contract negotiations, because it's not just, when we are called in at the very last minute, oh, you need to get me a better price, I need 5%, and everything else is already agreed on, and you just have to negotiate, and it's really hard, and you can rarely get more than 10%, because that's how it works, right? Now, what I mean by that is really looking at a project and challenge the consulting firm and the internal stakeholders on the scoping, on the staffing, on the duration of the project, challenging them on saying, hey, do you really need to have a full team staffed on day one, or actually can we move the needle a little bit because we have a ramp up? All of this is part of the negotiation, and that's where you can really make some difference, and in a way that is not squeezing the consultants, because you don't want that. You want a win-win partnership where you are not their favorite client because you're not you pay blindly, but their favorite client because you know what you want, and you're playing on that. But that means that you need to have that simple relationship and make sure that they get a fair price for their work, but you get the right scope for your problem.
And generally speaking, having the SOW, having the contract prepared by the consultant is usually not a good start. Okay. I'm just playing the timekeeper. I see
Yes.
it's
We have 3 minutes. So if you have any questions, and we'll have a short Q&A after that. So if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat while we're discussing about the key takeaways. So first of all, and we've discussed that over and over, value over cost. The whole point of bringing in consultants is not to get the cheapest thing, is to have a solution to your problem. And so what you want is finding partners that will help you solve your problem and having the right value for money. I think that we need to keep that in mind when we are trying to work with consultants. The second thing is that having a structured scenario-based process, it what gives you that view of a consultant that is way more than just rate cards. In a way, we are giving you a way to assess a consultant work, just like if you had a project in front of you. And we know that when you're discussing and with consultants to build a panel and to negotiate MSA, this is the part of the equation that is missing. The third element is that this cannot happen well if you don't collaborate with your internal stakeholders. This is key to make it work, and it goes both ways, because actually they may not be convinced at the beginning, but if you do things right and discuss and listen to the expectations and integrate them into the process, that's how also you convince them that that's something that brings value and that they want to go there, right? The fourth point is that it's minimal disruption to use such a process, because you have something that is familiar to everyone. But the process is the same. It's just that the different step will be done a bit differently. And then you have that knowledge of consulting that can really help you make each step valuable, really. And that's what makes the difference. But it's not because the process is disruptive in that sense. It's not because you're changing stuff around, moving stuff around. This is just an RFP process, right? It looks like it, and it's the same. It's just that the important steps may not be the same ones then for another category, but at the end of the day, this is the same process. Right?
Just pay attention to the letters.
Yes.
Just lessons. I mean, a real life lesson.
Yes.
We considered the first time we launched this exercise that what we were asking was information. So we labeled it RFI. But then we wanted the answers to be real answers and the numbers to be real numbers. So we said, hey guys, now we can move to the MSA page part and so on. Say, oh, do you mean that the answers were kind of final answers? Because you did not call it RFP, you called it RFI. It was extremely confusing for us. So just be clear with the consultants on the fact that you expect real answers and not fake answers. Yeah.
And the last point is that you can really achieve measurable and sustainable savings, and without compromising the quality. And I think that's kind of what we're looking for when you're building a consulting panel. You don't want to. That's kind of the two extremes of the spectrum. On one side, you have great consultants, great quality, but sometimes you are overpaying for what you get, or you're working with consultants that are too expensive for the type of work you use them for. That's one side of the spectrum. And the other side is that you always go with the cheapest, with the lowest bidder, which is absolutely not the right way to do, because sometimes you need a brand for many reasons, political reasons, for instance, because you have a project that has a visibility to the investors or to the board level, and you need a brand, and that's it. So and you need to be somewhere in the middle where you have the best value for a reasonable price. And that's why we always talk about value and over cost, and we talk about the two, and we talk about ROI, because ultimately that's what you should be looking for, the highest and maximized ROI. Okay, are there, before we move to the next step, are there any questions about what we've discussed today, or can we move to the conclusion? Okay, I guess that we can move. So just for those of you who would like to explore a bit further the methodology, we offer a 1-hour session to brainstorm and build a plan just for you. And we'll go over what you're doing today, what it would mean to build a new one, and then build together a roadmap so you can get started to build your panel. So if you're interested, just type your name or roadmap in the chat, and then we'll just contact you to schedule a short 1-hour session. Okay, so just do that,
or ping us offline if you're shy.
You can contact us offline as well. So just go. I will wrap up because we're just a few minutes over the time. One thing very important: if you want to have the slides of that presentation, we have a community online that is called Smart Consulting Sourcing, and we'll share the slides after tomorrow morning probably, so you can find them there. And the full video of the webinar will be available on YouTube beginning of next. Hopefully tomorrow, and if not, on Monday. And so you can go there. We have a YouTube channel, Consulting Quest, and we'll send you an email with the link as soon as it's available. Okay, and we have 3 more webinars coming up. Our next webinar will be in January. We'll talk about the roadmap to digitalizing consulting procurement. That's another of our activities to develop a SaaS for consulting procurement. Then we'll talk about what are the key insights and pitfalls. In May 2025, it's already there, it's around the corner. We'll talk about consulting pricing and how firms build their rates and what it means for you. And in October next year, we'll talk about maturity in consulting procurement and where do you stand and what it means to be a mature organization in consulting procurement. Well, that's it. We're done. 5 minutes over time. I think this is rather good for once. Thank you all for your participation. If you want to continue the conversation, you can contact us directly at my email is ellen@consultingquest.com. You can contact me directly, or you can contact me on LinkedIn, or contact any of the other 3. Thank you to all. Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, Doug. And talk to you later, I hope, in another webinar. Bye-bye.